All right. Good evening, everyone, once more. And we are welcome to another day for our tutorial. Welcome to NextCollege. Of course, today we are going to look at some other things we've done and see how we can improve our CSS experience. So in our last class, we actually looked at some colors, font, and even units. Okay, we were able to establish what CSS is all about. We talked about how to link it, types of CSS, inline, internal, and external CSS. We looked at the challenges we face with some of them, something like the inline styling, also the internal styling, and why we needed external CSS. We went ahead to tell ourselves what CSS actually stands for, and we explained in details what cascading style sheet is all about. Okay, so if you were not in our last class, I urge you to go and watch the previous video. All right, while you are still taking this one, you should also watch that one because it's an introduction to CSS and you need it. Okay, now today we are going to establish what we call layouts. We look at some concepts in layouts. But before then, I would like to give you a brief analogy. I didn't give this thing in my first class because you needed to learn about color. At least it can be able to guide you to know where the element is, because once you apply the background color, you should be able to see the space it is occupying, right? So we know that in web development, we talk about the UI UX guys. They are responsible for designing the website, right? They just have to write the visual representation. We see what the website is going to look like after the work is done, right? After them, we have the developers, the front-end guys, write the visual interface, translate it to code. Then the back-end people take over the logic aspect of the application. Okay, that's cool. And this thing is something that we can relate, because somebody can say, I want to build a website. They want to build a website, right? It's all about building, right? So if we are to relate it with what we all already know or what we come across every day, you see that when you want to build a house, right, you meet the architecturals who are going to design the plan. Of course, you see the blueprint of the house even before it is being built. You see car being parked here, trees will be here. You see a beautiful house, okay? But maybe you have not even gotten a land where you are going to build it, but they are going to design it the way it should look after everything. That's like the UI UX guys, the first people that always come into the picture. After then, you think of, okay, the front-end guys who are going to build the user interface, right? Now we start thinking of, okay, you first of all have a land where you build a house, you bring the materials, blocks, cement, all these things, you just bring them together one place, right? They don't have shape, they don't have color, okay? It's not a house yet, but you have brought all these things needed for building the house in a particular location. That's the HTML for you, okay? HTML has no form, okay? It has no color. It's just your packing. And that's why you see that when you are writing your HTML, everything is stacked in block form, one after the other. You place the image, you add another paragraph. You see that it comes immediately after the image. You add another thing, it comes immediately after. So it's just stacking one place. It doesn't have form. That's you bringing the materials needed to build the website, okay? So, but what happens when you now have the engineers? They map out the foundation, right? They start laying blocks. You see that this is possible for the house to take shape because of CSS. And that part of CSS is what we call layout. Okay, so we are now laying out the structure of that particular building okay, you map out the room, the parlor, the kitchen, and some other thing, you start building it. For the fact that it is taking shape means that there is CSS applied to it. I have seen a lot of illustration pictures whereby you see someone just you have already built house without painting. They call it HTML. That is a lie. Okay, already built house without painting and with a roof. That is a lie, because that house has a shape. You have mapped out the window. You have mapped out everything is standing. So the only property that maybe those people who are using that kind of illustration have in mind is that CSS means color. Color is just a part of CSS, right? There is what we call layout. For the fact that there is a foundation already laid, it means we have applied CSS. It's only CSS that can do this. HTML cannot do it. HTML cannot position the room where it's supposed to be. It cannot position another thing where it's supposed to be. So we must understand this. That is the work of CSS. By default, I'm supposed to teach you guys layout before we even talk of colors, because it is when you already establish the foundation of the building, establish the layout of the building, that you can now think of painting, right? Adding some beautiful things to make it look appealing, right? It can only happen when the house is already standing. So if the house is not standing, you cannot be painting blocks that are just packed there and maybe woods and the rest of them. You can't just be painting everything on the floor before it is being stacked, right? So I'm meant to teach you guys layout, but if I start teaching you guys layout without color, you might not be able to appreciate where each element stays, right, on the web page. So that's the reason we needed to teach you colors, font, and some other cool stuff before we can talk of other things, right? So if you now have this general picture in your head, all right, every website has a layout. There is no house that you will build in this world, even the one that looks like a football, it has a layout. That football shape is its own layout. So if you have it in mind, every website has a layout. In fact, this interface we are using here, it is built on top of layout. There are layouts here. You see that some things are stacked to one side. Some things is not just coming one after the other. There is being positioned. You see a lot of buttons at the bottom here. Okay, these things are the layouts. All right, irrespective of the colors or any other thing or the border radius, but these things are the layouts. So it's what you see in every website. So if I should open NextCollege.dev, you see how our website is loading fast. That's because we built it with latest technology, and that is what you're learning. All right. So you see that this particular website, there is something here, okay, at the center, one at the right-hand side, one at the left-hand side. This is a layout of this. Okay, this is a layout. You see these cards, one after the other like this, is a layout. It is not just coming one after the other, stacking like it doesn't have CSS, all right? So every website, you build it with a layout. You must always know this. You build it with a layout. Now, we cannot be talking of layout without looking at what we call box model in CSS, okay? If you understand box model, your problem is 30% solved in CSS, okay? If you understand the concept of box model, your problem is 30% solved, all right? So what does box model talk about? Let me load our application that we have been building, all right? So this is the application we have been building. We know that each page is made up of elements. These things are elements. You have the opening tag, you have the closing tag of elements, and you have the main content, of which the main content can be another element. Okay? The main content can be another element. So the rule states that each element can be treated as a box. each element can be treated as a box. Now, the question lies in what is box? What do we mean by box? Okay, what do we mean by box? Now, I'm just going to open Word. Okay, I want to illustrate here. So, opening here, let me just draw something here. All right. Is it or insert? Well, let me insert shape. Yes. Let me just insert shape here. This is a shape, right? Now, I'm going to add another shape. Okay. Insert another shape. Let me add another shape here. All right. I'm going to change the color to what? Let me change it to yellow. Okay. Now, let me add another shape. Okay. Let me add another shape here. All right. Let me change the color to green. All right. Now, this is what an element looks like. All right. This is what an element looks like. Now, in CSS, the box model will help us to understand some things, some terminologies, and of course, things that we need to work with. Okay. So every element can be treated as a what? As a box. And every box has three main components. Okay, let me say four parts of a box, right? 4 parts of a box. Okay, so here we see that we have the outer things here. All right, we have the outer thing here. We have this yellow thing and we have this green thing. Now, this green thing is the main content. All right, the main content of a box. Now, let me give you an analogy. If you are wearing a shoe, okay, if you are putting on a shoe, right, you see that you put your leg inside the shoe, right? Your leg is the main content of the shoe, okay? Your leg is the main content of that shoe. Now, there is a space between your leg and the inside of the shoe you are wearing, right? There is a space, even though some shoe can be tight, but if it is loose, you see that there is a space, or there can be a space between your leg and the inside of the shoe. True or false? True, right? That space, see it as this yellow part. Okay, so this is your leg, the main content, and this yellow part is the space that can exist. This space can be small, okay? It can be big. We can make it to be as anything we want. We can change it, change the color, some other thing which we are going to look at, right? Now, outside this particular space, there is the shoe itself that separates your leg from the surrounding, from the environment, right? This is the leather of the shoe that is separating your leg from the environment. So this is your leg inside the shoe that is loose, creating a space between your leg and the main shoe here. This is the leather of the shoe, right? Now, outside this leather of the shoe, you have normal space, like the environment, right? Outside here. So if this is your, for example, if this is your, let me see if I can be able to, I want to be able to copy this. Oh, I can't duplicate this or what? Okay. So let me just scroll a bit. This is merge. This is merge in size. Okay. By the way, let me just reduce it. I can still be able to reduce it. Let me reduce everything. Okay. But it's still the same thing we are doing. Let me just reduce it so that you understand it more. Okay. Okay. So let me copy this one, paste it, bring it at the center. Okay. Copy this one, paste it, bring it at the center. Okay. Can you guys hear me, please? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Now, let's assume this is your right leg. This is your maybe left leg, and this is your right leg. Okay. You can see this. Let me see. Okay. Okay. Now, this particular one here is your right leg, and this one is your left leg, right? Now, you see that, let me just remove this thing for now. Okay. Okay, so this is the inside, which is like your foot. Okay, your foot, and this is space. Okay, the space between your foot and the main shoe. Okay, this part is the shoe itself. Now the same thing goes with this. This is the inside, which is the foot, the main content, and this is just the space. And now this one is the shoe. You see that if you are standing, there is a space between this shoe and this shoe. This particular space here. Okay, this is a space. So every element can be treated in this way. That is what box model is. Now there is what this inside is called. This is called the content of the element. The content of the element, and that is what you have like text or anything that is found inside the tags. Okay, that is the content. Now outside the content, we have a space. This space, we call it padding. You see that when you were small, maybe if you have found yourself in that situation, you see that if they have gotten a very big shoe for you, they have to pad it, right? They have to pad it. Or normal experience, if you are wearing some kind of clothes, some ladies, they have to pad. You don't pad outside the clothes, you pad the inside. The same way you don't pad outside the shoe, you pad the inside, right? So this space is called the padding for HTML elements. This is called the padding. Now, this main part, which is where the shoe is contained, it is called the what? The border. All right. This is like the border. It's just very common, just like you know what border means. Okay. So separating two things. So this is the border. The border separates the exterior from the inside, right? This is the border now. Now, outside this border, every other thing outside this border, right, is called the margin. Okay, we call it the margin. So you can give a margin. So all all these parts of this box model can be increased in size. They can be increased in width. They can be increased, applied. Some things which you are going to see. So we can increase this border to be wider. We can also increase this margin here to be wider. We can increase this padding to be wider. This text, we can increase it, the font size, right? So that is box model for you. So if you understand this thing now, right? So I think we can now be able to proceed back to this our code now. All right. Now, if we say that everything is treated as a box, okay, let me just rename this. Let me have div. Okay. Let me have div. Let's say hello. All right. I want to duplicate this. Okay. Let me just use one first. Okay. Let me just use one first to illustrate this. Now, we are just going to, let me open that application so that we see it live. Okay. All right, this is what we already have. So we just have one thing which says hello. Of course, this particular color, I don't like this color. So let me just replace it with orange. Okay. Text width, let me just remove this. All these things, we don't have anything here again. So let's just remove everything. So paragraph is no longer there. Okay. Let's have what we have there. Okay. So just body that we have. So let me just refresh. Okay, everything works. We still have that this stuff. Now, what I'm going to do is that I am just going to style that particular H1 a bit. Okay. Sorry, that div. Let me style it a bit. Let me say, is it even div that I'm supposed to have here? Let me have H1. Let me have H1 so that we don't confuse ourselves. H1. So if you have not watched our previous class, all these things I'm doing, we have done it before. Selectors. You have to go and rewatch that particular video. All right. So for this, we are going to give a background color. Okay. Let me give it red. Give the main text a color. Sorry, a color to be what? White. Of course. Let me save it. Let's give a width. A width to be what? Okay. Let me give the width to be 50%. 50 is much. Let me just say 50% of the parent. Okay. Let me just refresh. Okay, this is what we have. This is what we have. Now, by default, you see that, of course, this particular stuff, it is looking somehow. If I should zoom it now, you see that this is the main text, the main content of the box. This is it. Now, there is supposed to be a space between the text and the edge of this particular stuff. All right. So what we are going to do is that I think we are going to see how we can be able to add some padding, because we know that once we add a padding, something is going to happen. But before then, I think we can be able to add a border first. Let us add border first. So how do we add border? We just have to use the property border. Say border like this. All right. Now, border is actually something that is in form of, okay, we use it to be something that is in form of a line. Okay. And when I explained what border is to you using the shoe analogy, you see that shoe is something that has to be thick or something that looks like that. So we have to define the thickness of this particular border. All right. So the first thing we put here, we can put something like let me say 5 pixels. Okay, because I want it to be very obvious. Then we are going to tell us the kind of border. There are a lot of them. It can be solid. I will show you guys what it means. We can put solid. Then you tell us the color. What is the color of the border? Okay, let me save this thing for now and come here and refresh this. So we see that by default, the browser is going to give it the color of white if you don't provide your own color. So this is a border. But if you notice here, you see that there is no space existing between this border and the main content, which is hello, right? You see that this is, of course, ignore the fact that you are seeing something at some kind of space at the top and bottom. That is a default like this. But this will tell you that there is nothing existing here. This is just like your tight shoe that is touching the leather of the shoe, right? So it doesn't look good, right? It doesn't look good because if you come back to NextCollege here, I don't know if you can see something like that. If you come back to NextCollege, you appreciate that this logo here, it is not touching the edge of this place. There is a bit space here, all right? Even this button, there is a bit space at the right-hand side. Let me see if we can have something that can be more obvious. Okay, you see that this content, all contents here, they are not touching the edge, this edge here. Something is existing between them. So they are just at the center somehow, and it looks nice, right? So you are going to, you don't need these things, the content, all right, to be touching something like this. And what can happen is that we can now think of how do we increase this particular margin. You see that for this place, I can just drag it, take it closer. I've decreased it. I can increase the border, margin, padding, sorry. So you see that I'm just increasing and doing this thing. Forget the fact that this one, okay, this is padding. I'm talking of border here, sorry. This is the border. I can increase, I can decrease it, okay? I can increase, I can decrease it at all sides or at one side, right? So if you know that, you see that we can now be able to think of adding a padding, all right? We can add a padding so that there will be gap between this border and the content, right? So let us just try it. Let's say padding, okay? Let me say 5 pixel. Okay, let me just use 5 pixel. Okay, let me refresh. You see what happens? There is already a space existing, so it looks better like this. Instead of stacking, touching the edges, it looks better, right? It looks better. So if you want to still increase it, you can add something like 10. Okay, this is just for us to see what is going on. So if I refresh it again, it increases, right? Now the border, you see that this white border, I can still be able to increase the border depending on how thickness I want it to be, right? Depending on how thick I want it to be. So here, I can say that the border is no longer 5. Let it be 10, okay? So if I come here and refresh, you see that the border has increased. The border has increased. So this border now, you see that we can be able to add a color here. Let me say the color is black, not white. Okay, I want it to be black. So the third thing you add here is talking about the color of that particular border. So if I hit this, you see that it has changed to black. All right, it has changed to black. So this is very cool and nice. And another thing we can apply for border, which you'll be seeing more often, is that you notice that if you come to this particular our website, you see that this button that says subscribe, there is a border that is somehow like a white color, right? This is a border. Okay, so this is, let me come to this one. You see this dashboard here. The dashboard is a content. That is the main content of this box model. The thing surrounding it is the padding. There is a padding, and the border is giving the color of white. The size of this, the thickness of this border is smaller than what we have here, right? Depending on the kind of thing you want to achieve. Depending on, but most importantly, you see that this particular border here, it is sharp at the edges, right? It is sharp at the edges. But this one now, it is a bit rounded at the edges. A bit rounded. So this looks nicer, okay? And even if you see this particular white area here, you see that the border, there is a bit rounded, even though we don't see the border, like the border thickness is not obvious here, but we can still see a bit rounded because of this white background here. All right. Now, you see that even this send message is also like that. We use it every day in web. So you should be able to know about it. So how do we achieve that kind of effect? We say border radius. That is a radius, okay? Radius is something like a half of something, a half of a circle. So that's a radius. It's not a triangle, all right? It's not a triangle. It's just a radius. So we can say border radius. You see, there are a lot of other things associated with border, okay? So you can see border radius here. So once we have it, we can add small border radius. You can say something like 5 pixel. It's actually much, but okay. So where we normally use all this pixel is where when we have all this kind of, you see that something happened. It's no longer looking that bad. Okay, let me just reduce this particular border to 5. Okay, so we have something nicer. Okay, all right. So let me just increase the border radius to 10. Okay, so you see that this is now looking very nice, like a button, right? It's now looking very nice, like a button. Now, outside this border, all these yellow areas outside this, you see that there is actually a margin. It's a margin, right? Just like what I told you guys, a margin. So we can increase the margin as well. You can say that this margin should be increased, okay? So we can apply something like margin, let's say 10 pixel, okay? So we want the margin. So let me hit, you see what happened? Okay, so by default, browser added something at the top and the left, and of course it was able to override that. So what I'm going to do, let me take it to 20 so you see it very clearly. Okay, let me take it to 20. You see what happened? So as you increase it, it is increasing. All right, it is increasing, and that is very beautiful. Okay, you see what is happening now. Somebody might ask, why do we need all this? So if you come back to this particular our website, you see that there are a lot of contents. For example, this contact us page here. You see that these are just list of items, numbers, but the numbers are not stacked each other. The numbers, each of them are like a box, right? This is a different box. This is a different box. But because there is a margin existing between the two of them, they can't stack. They can't stack and meet each other. The same thing with all these things you are seeing here. None of them are touching each other because of what? Margin. Now we can experiment that, okay? We can experiment that by adding another element here. Let's add another H1 here, okay? Let's add 3. Hello 1, hello 2, hello 3. Let's save it and let's come and refresh and see what happened. Let me just, okay, very fine. So you see what is going on now. This is taking shape because it's no longer the HTML that used to stack one after the other. There is something, a space is already existing around each of them. That is how many pixels? That is 10 pixels each, 50 pixels each. That's what I gave it, right? So a space is existing between them. That is what a box model is all about. If you know this, your problems are half solved in what you are going to be doing, okay? So this is how we can achieve that. Of course, there are other ways to do it, okay? If we don't want to, for example, we don't want to apply, you see that when I applied the padding was added up, okay, left and bottom, right? And so it is at all 4 sides, right? At all 4 sides. If you come back to this drawing, okay, to this drawing, let's take this for example. You see that what I just did, once I apply what I applied, it's going to apply it at all 4 sides. But we have the flexibility. You see that here, I can shrink this side, right side. That means this particular this particular border and this one are not the same size. I can decide to shrink this one as well. So you see that only these two are affected, right? The same thing applied to margin, it applied to padding, it applies to the border, all right? So how can we be able to achieve that? To achieve that, we can't just say padding, for example, because if you say padding, it's going to add space at all 4 sides of the content, all right? But what happens if I want the space to be at the up? What I just need to do is to say padding top, padding top. If I want to pad the bottom, I just need to say padding bottom. If I want to pad the left, I just need to say padding left. Let us do experiments. So instead of saying padding like this, right? Let me say padding. You see that we have some suggestions. You see padding left, padding bottom, padding right, padding top. Okay, let us just pad the what? The top. Okay, let's give it 15 pixel. Remember now, before I refresh this thing, what you have to know is that we have padded only this top, right? It means that if I refresh this, padding left that gives space between this text and this border black should not be there, and the bottom one should not be there, right? So let me just refresh. You see what happened? Only the top has been padded. Left, bottom, and the right, they are not padded. All right? Left, bottom, they are not padded. If I want to pad the bottom, no, not the top, I can replace this thing and say padding what? Bottom. If I save this thing now, come here and refresh. You see that only the bottom has been padded. The top is not padded. If I just want to pad the left, okay, the left side, not the top or bottom, you know that this is going to be at the center now, but this one is also going to be padded. All right. The same thing goes with margin and border, because if I want to add margin to the left, just the left side or the bottom, let me say bottom, I cannot say margin, because this will affect the four sides. What I can say is margin what? Bottom. All right. If I save this thing now, come here and refresh. Okay. Wait, let me see what is going on. Padding border. Okay, sorry, not margin. This is not what I wanted to target. I wanted to target the what? The border. Okay. So I cannot just say this. Let me say border bottom. Okay. Let me save. Let me refresh. You see what happened? The top, there is no border at the top, even though you still have border radius. This is almost the same thing with what we have here. You see that you can't actually see the borders, but you see that there is a radius, because the border is not visible, but there is a radius applied. And this place is what is happening. And you see that we have underline. It's like underlining each item here. So if you come back to this place, you see that this email has an underline. Full name has underline. Type your message has an underline. So this can be treated as border bottom. With border bottom, you can experience this kind of behavior. So let me just make it to be more look-alike to that. What can I do to achieve that? First of all, let me remove this particular BG, which is orange. Okay, let me just remove this thing, and of course BG here, which is this, let me remove it as well. The color, which is this, let me remove it so that it becomes black. Okay, so I want us to have something that looks okay. So you see what we have. So this border bottom is still very big, so I can just remove the size. Let me make it 2. Okay, let me come here and refresh. You see that it's looking a bit okay now, but even at that, you see that this one doesn't have any border radius. So you can still remove it. You can still remove this border radius. All right, you can remove it or comment it just like that. And of course, when we refresh this thing now, you see that it is looking like this, just like what we have here. You see, it's just looking almost like that. All right, that is cool. So that is border. We can if we want to apply it at the left hand side, the only thing we need to do is to say what? Border what? Border what? Left, and save it. Come back here, refresh, and it will be at the left. But you see that it is not giving space. Why? Because the padding is at the bottom that we gave padding. So we need to give space by giving padding left. Okay? We need to give space by giving padding left now. All right? So let me refresh. You see that we already have space now. If I want it to be at the right, this is how we can achieve it. This is box model. Now, anything you can do for margin, padding, border, they can be done in all of them. The only difference is that in some of them you have some extended properties like radius. Okay, you don't talk of radius in padding, or let me say margin, right? You talk of radius in what? In the border, right? So this border, apart from solid, we can still have another one. Let me say, is this solid? I've forgotten all these things, but in most cases you will be using solid. Okay. The dotted, and we have dotted and some other ones. Okay, even the one that looks like envelope. Okay, you see how this one looks like now in dotted. Yeah, I think this one is the one that looks like envelope or so. All right, so these are different ways we can apply it. Now, let me just bring back everything here. Let me have the border at all angles, and of course, let me add padding everywhere. Okay, let me save this thing and bring this thing back again. All right, so this is okay like this, and of course now there is a better way we can write this. If we want maybe border or padding or margin up and bottom will be the same size, and the left and right will be the same size, we can do that. Now, if we add another value here, 10 pixel, this is another thing we are doing, padding. What does it mean? This first one is talking of up and down. Is going to take 15. Left and right, they are going to take 10. Okay, so if I come here and refresh this thing, you see that this one has been reduced because it is the one taking 10. Okay, if I want it to take something like 50, okay, 50. I come here and refresh. You see, the up and down, they didn't increase because they are 15. But left and right, they did what? They increased, right? So that is how another way we can present this, and it will look fine. So box model, this is all about box model. You can learn more about the properties of border, margin, pad. There are a lot of things about that. Okay, and of course, when you are building a project, you see the kind of thing it's required. You can now be able to think of what you are going to achieve with that. All right. I believe this is a bit explanatory, and you understand it. Please, I need a reaction. Have you guys been following what I'm teaching, please? All right. So do we have any question at this point? I need questions. Serious questions. Okay. Okay. Somebody.
Yeah. Good evening, class. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we are really enjoying the class. But what you said concerning those padding, if I want you to put it in the middle, can go back to the CSS. This L01, no, the L01. I want the L01 or L02, L03 to be in the middle. That's the LO. You just come up like it will be in the center of this website. I don't know if you get me.
Okay. We have not reached that particular stage.
Okay.
We are going to talk. These are just layout. We just started layout. If I started with you guys some of all those ones without you understanding box model, it will be very difficult. So what I need is any question concerning what I just teach about box model. Do we have any question? Okay. Any other guy about the box model? Do you have any concern about the box model? That's the most important thing I want us to understand. If you have understand what it means, that every element here, even anything you add on this place can be treated as, even this body can be treated as a box. Okay, you see it, view it as a box. Your mentality should change. Once you see an element, you see that it can be a box, and you can be able to use margin, padding, and some other things to manipulate it. Okay. God's power.
All right, good evening, sir.
Okay, good evening.
Yeah, I really appreciate the lecture so far, though I'm just kind of concentrating now. I just got to the house, I've been on transit since. I really want to understand the difference between the margin and the padding.
Okay,
The difference between the both of them.
the difference about margin and padding.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I gave you an analogy. Take you wearing a shoe, for example. When you were a kid, maybe your parents, they managed to buy you oversized shoe, for example. You have to wear it, right? Now, wearing it, you notice that your leg is not filling up the space, right? There is a space between your leg and the shoe, the inside of the shoe. That space between your leg is the main content. Your leg is the main content, but the space between your leg and the inside of the shoe is called the padding. It's called a padding, right? So if that is the case, you see that if this text is actually the content, this space between this text and this border is called the padding. So this empty space, white empty space here, is called a padding. Now, the shoe itself is treated as a margin, right? That is this dot line you are seeing here. This is the shoe. That is the shoe. Inside of it is the inside of the shoe, which your leg cannot reach. So your parents, they have to get you something like stockings or any material to pad your leg so that it will not be removing when you are walking, right? So they are going to pad space, this extra space here, right? Now, margin is a space outside the border, right? So I use this thing for example. If this is your leg, the right leg, this is your left leg, this space existing around these two legs here, they are called the margin. This particular area that looks like blue is the what? The margin. Okay, is the border, sorry. This is the margin. This is the what? Border. And this yellow area now is the what? The padding. This green is the main content. Is the main content. So the space between the main content and the border is called a padding. And the space outside the border, is called what? The margin. So if you come back to this place, the space between hello 1, you see this border of hello 1 and border of hello 2, this space is called the margin. All these spaces are called the margin. Now, the space between hello 1 and the border of hello 1 is called the what? The padding. Hello 1 is the main content, and the margin here is just what we have here. That is box model. Every element can be treated as this. So even if I add something like anchor tag, I can treat it that way, or let me say div. If I add div, so for example, if I say div like this, I write this is a div. All right. I can come here now. Okay, we just have one div, so I can target just that div. I can say div like this. Then I will say, let me give it background color first to be what? Orange. All right. Now let me give it a, let me save it first so that you see it. Okay. Now this is the div taking the whole of this stuff. So let me just reduce the size. Let me see the width to be what? Let me say 30% of the screen of the parents. Sorry. So let me save it, come here, and let me refresh. Okay. Now you see that this particular div, it doesn't have border yet. We have not added border, but you see that this text is touching this place. So let me just add border so that we see it. I'm just going to copy this border here and paste it here. Save it, come back here and refresh. So you see that it is actually touching the edges. So this is like a fitted shoe for it. It doesn't need to add padding, but in web development, padding is what we want. We don't want a fitted one. Padding, we must be able to think of padding, right? We don't want the one that will be touching something like this. We want to pad it. So we can say padding. Now, adding just padding, you know that it's going to add at all four sides, not just one, not up, not bottom, not left, not right. If I want it to be specific, I have to say padding top, padding top, padding left, padding right, or padding bottom, right? But if I just say padding 10 pixel, all right, save it, come back here, and of course refresh. You see that it's no longer touching. It has added space between the main content and the border, right? Now, I told you that space outside this border is called margin. So all these places, if I don't want it to be as close as this to this screen, I can add margin left. Okay, I can say that this top is okay for me. I don't want it to be add another extra margin. Okay, I can just add margin left here. By doing that, I can just say margin left to be, let me say 10 pixel. I save it and come back to browser and refresh. You see that it has created more space outside the border. So that is what box model is all about. Does that answer your question?
Perfectly well, sir.
All right, that's good.
Thank
Tracy,
you.
your hand is up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, if we want to target a particular box like that H1, H2, H3, we wanted to target maybe the middle one and maybe give it some padding and radius. How do we to target it? Like make only just
Okay,
that change it to the box. Yes.
okay, I understand what you're asking now. And at this point, I feel like we should now introduce a way to target a particular element when we have more than one element bearing the same tag, right? Because on this our page now, we have more than one element bearing the same tag. So if I say div, I can be able to target just the div I want because we just have one div. But in this case, as I said, H1, even if I didn't want to style the hello one, I just want to style the hello thread. You see that every other H1 has been affected, right? That introduces us to what we call class. A class is a property we add that is going to allow us to target a particular element. We have another means of doing that, but when we enter JavaScript, you learn that one more. Okay, so for this place, if I just want to target H1, this particular hello one, I don't want to affect every other style here. I'm going to add class attribute here, right? Now I can call it anything I want. Okay, I can say target me, anything you want to call it, but you have to reason in a semantic way, or you have to think in a way, you have to reason in a way that you don't name it just what it doesn't do. Okay, so if this thing is like, we are going to look at that later anyway, but let me just inform you that you can name it anything you want. All right, but it's a good practice to name it according to what the content is all about. So if we want to target this one now you see that if that's the only thing we want to style here, we no longer need to add just H1. Okay, so what we can do is to make reference to that particular name, that class. So we can just paste it here and add this and now style, right? This looks like it will work, right? So what I'm just going to do is let me just do what? copy this, okay? Paste it here, all right? Now, let me comment this. Okay, why am I having this? Why is it not commenting everything at once? Okay, let me just believe it will work like this. Okay, let me come back because we have targeted that, right? Let me now refresh, right? Let me refresh. Now, look at what happened. There is nothing applied to here. The style I wanted to apply here, which is the one I targeted, it didn't even happen. Something is wrong. Something is wrong because it's supposed to, this is the one I placed target me, and that is the one I applied the style on, right? Now, this is what we expect to have. When you are dealing with a class, you are assigning a unique name to a particular element. You can't just access the name directly like you access normal elements, right? You can't. What you do is that you access it using a dot. You say dot, then you mention that thing you want to target. I don't know if it is clear. You see that this one, we cannot say dot div because a div is an element. So when it is an element, you mention the element becomes the selector itself. But when we are adding a class, we must add a dot for us to be able to target that thing. So if I come back to the browser here and they refresh this, boom, everything is happening. You see that only H3 has been styled the way we wanted. If you want to style this one in a separate way, we can also target it in a separate way. But if we want to have a unique style for all the H1, but added style for a particular H1, right? We can still be able to do this. Okay, we can be able to say H1, right? Let me save and come back here and refresh. So everything is back. But this H3, I want it to have the background of orange. All right. So what can I do? What can I do? It means that I have to mention that particular tag name, class name. All right. And just apply the color I want to apply on that particular element. And that is background color towards orange, and save it. Now, coming back to this browser, if I refresh it, you see that only H3 has been applied. If I want to add different colors to all of them, you see that I must target each and every one of them. Okay, so I can be able to target this one and add class to it. Let me say hello one. Let me be naming it the names we have. Okay, let me just copy this. Okay, let me paste here hello 2. All right, now let me come back here, copy this. All right, say hello 3. All right, so you see that I have to target it appropriately. So this one is going to be what? Hello 1. Okay, hello 3. That is the one we targeted. So we must have it with what? Dots. All right. So let me just duplicate this like this. So this is going to be hello. In fact, let me start from here. Hello 1, hello 2, hello 3. Okay. So the background for this is going to be red. The background for this is going to be green. Okay. So if I come back to this place now and refresh, you see that each and every one of them has been applied a different. So I can use it if I want to apply a border radius to hello 2. I can now be able to do it only in hello 2 by saying border radius. Let me say 15 pixel. All right. If I come here now and refresh, you see that only this one is having border radius. If I want to shift the margin a bit, I don't want it to be at the same level with others, I can still come and say margin left. Okay, let me give it 30 pixel. Okay, let me save. Come back here and refresh. Okay. I think other ones are more than that. Okay, 50. We gave other ones 50. So let me give it something like 80 so that it shifts a bit. Sorry. So if I refresh this, you see that it has shifted towards right. Okay, so that is how we can be able to target each element and do anything we want to do on it. So if you come here, you can still see that, okay, most things, this is where we are coming to. Anyway, let's leave that one for now. Is that clear? Is that clear? H somebody. The person is no longer in class F. Okay, so if we are done with that, we need to now think of other ways, because yeah, this looks fine, all right? But we can't use this thing to be structuring our web page. We can't use it to actually establish the actual layout. Even though we can be able
Yes,
to.
it is clear, sir. It is clear, sir.
Okay, even though we can be able to manually even though we can manually add margins like this so that the layout looks somehow appealing, we can now be able to use it to position the element where we want it to be, right? If we want to be positioning the element where we want it to be, if we want this one to be coming this side now, you see that we just have to be adding margin left or any of all those things, right? But this is not what we can do. This is not, you see, I can use it to position it where I want to be. So this is a layout I'm establishing with just margin, padding, and border, right? Box model. The idea of box model is allowing me to shift some things here to stay where I want them to be. That is the foundation. That is the laying of the foundation of the building, right? There is a better way to do this. Okay, there are better ways to do this. We can be talking of a responsive design, okay, which we are going to look at later, without looking at a better way to be able to do what, to achieve this. Was that a question somebody wanted to ask? I heard somebody raise, I don't know if it's a raising of hand.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so far I understand what you have said. I want to ask, what if you want to arrange the H1, H2, H3 in like a sequence order, like in linear? I don't know if you come to that.
That is where we are coming to.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I want to also state again that when we build a web page, okay, we are not just writing normal text, okay? We are talking of arranging things. That is the actual building itself, right? After the architecturals, they give you the design and you bring the materials together, which is the HTML. The actual building is in the laying of foundation, telling us where something is going to stay. That is the ability to do it makes you a builder, all right? If you are a builder who is laying foundation and one block is budging one side, it is not in straight line, it is not, you see that the house is not going to be looking perfect. So we need a way to make our website to look perfect in terms of the layouts. So for us to be talking of layouts, we must look at some concepts like what we call floats. Of course, that's the olden way, which we are going to see later, okay? And we must look at other things like grid and Flexbox. These are concepts you need to note down. If you know grid and Flexbox, your case is 60% solved. You have known the box model. If you know these two things now, your case is 60% solved. Why do we even need a layout? If we come to NextCollege here, you see that this has been written in different sections. You have the header here. you have the main content within the body here. Then you have the footer, right? This will allow you, this is possible because of layout. We can now be able to map section, sidebar. When I click, oh, this is registered. I can't click on that because it's going to take me to dashboard. Okay. So, but most importantly, when if I click this thing now, if it is okay, for example, let me take it in a mobile view. So when I'm in mobile view now, if I click here, you see that we have something that just pops out. Okay. This is just side stuff that comes out, sidebar that comes out. Okay. All these things are possible because we have to think of layouts. We have to think of layout. How to display all these cards. We cannot use margin to lay something down like this. Okay. We cannot be using those kind of things, or to place the footer, all these kind of things. We cannot just use only them. So we need to know more about all these things. Now in your HTML, they taught you about block elements and inline elements, right? Block elements, they stack vertically. True or false? True. Something like the div, section, paragraph. These are block elements. Once you place them as a HTML element, the first one is going to stay here. For example, if I should remove all these styles here, okay? Why am I having? I don't know why this thing is not commenting everything. Just throwing errors everywhere. Okay, so if I refresh this, you see that all these things are just stacking vertically. These are block elements, all right? These are block elements. But what happens if I add an element called span? Have you heard of span before? Have you heard of span before? Okay, it's just an element. Let me say hello one, mark. Okay, this is a span. And span is something, okay, let me just refresh. Okay, now we have it here. We have it here. But if we have something like paragraph like this, let me say, am I still in class? I was asking, can you guys still hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so if I have something like a paragraph that says this class is very important, guys. Now I want to style just important. We can add an element which we call span. Okay, so this span, you know that if this is a block element, of course it's going to break this into multiple lines. Okay, but if you just add this, let me, oh, not guys, let me add the guys here. Okay, so if I come back here, let me just refresh. So this is what we have. Very important, guys. Okay, there is no space here. Okay, so we have very important, guys. Okay, now let me even change it to H1 so that it becomes bolder. H1. H1. All right. So let me just target span because we just have one span here. I can be able to target only span without any issue, without affecting other elements. So I can say color. Let me say green. Okay. Now, if I refresh this, we see that only this is styled as a green, right? Only important. And why is it so? Because span is actually an inline element. Okay, it is inline. It can live here, all right? It can live here. It is not a block scope that should be able to stack on top of another stuff, right? So it is inline. I believe you guys have been taught about inline inline and the element and block elements. Another thing is something like anchor. So if I want to make this thing to be an anchor, okay, if I want to place it as an anchor, like to link us to somewhere, we can now be able to say something like, guys, learn more on anchor, okay, href. So let me just come here. Let me just place click here, and let me come back to this place, and of course come here, copy this URL. Okay, let me come back here, paste this as a href. Okay, now let me come back to our web page and refresh this. Now this click has appeared, so it is still inline, it's not stacking. Okay, it is inline and is appearing in horizontal here. So if I click this thing now, it should still work. All right, it's just navigating us to another page, but of course that page is external. All right, so that is it. Let me go back. So if we have understand this particular concept, it becomes easier for us to understand another concept, which is floats. Float is one of the CSS styling that we use to position elements on the web page. Okay, we use it to position elements on the web page. This is an olden ways, and that is what we use when we talk of something like, let me say, Vanguard News, for example. Let me see if we can see something there, because it is mostly used in all these kind of things for images and text. Okay, I don't think if, let me just click this one. Okay, this is not what I even want. Okay, so but let me just demonstrate what I wanted to show you guys. I'm going to remove these things for now. Okay, so what is float? Float was actually created to wrap text around images. So when we have image, we want to wrap around that particular image. We normally use floats to do that. All right. For example, let me remove all these things. Let me add image source to be this profile I added, ought to be profile. Yeah, I believe you know what ought is. Alternative, if this image is broken, you can now be able to see the text and know what the image is all about. Okay, let me close this. Let me refresh this. Okay, this is a bit much. So what I can do is that I can be able to come here and target the image. Let's remove span. We don't have it again. Image. Is it image? IMG. Okay. Once we have this, we can say width to be, let me say 50. Let me add %. Height to be 50%. Let me see what we have. Okay, this is a bit okay. Now, let me add another thing inside this particular. Okay, let me even have it in a div. All right, let's have it in a div first. Let me cut this, paste it inside this div. All right, now come here and add a paragraph. Okay, let me use a lorem emet abbreviation. This lorem, just type lorem if you are coding. It gives you a test, an already made test. It doesn't make sense, but it just generates it so that your work becomes faster. You don't need to worry yourself about the test you want to put there. Okay, lorem ipsum. So once you place this in, you have that. Of course, we see that the text is here, right? The text is here. It's not much anyway, but we can be able to do more. All right, let me see what I can do. If I can be able to copy everything and duplicate it. so that we have a lot of text. Okay. All right, this looks better. All right. Now, this is okay, but there are situations whereby you need an image to be here and the text to be here. All right. This is what we normally achieve in the olden days in web development. It's common in all these news outlets and some other things. All right. It is very common. So we can achieve that using this particular mindset. Okay. So how do we do that? We have to add a float to the image. Okay, we want to tell the image to float. Okay, left. Let's save this thing and come back to this place and refresh. Good. You see what we have. Now, what happens is that this is just floating, and of course, they are the same level with this particular text. All right, that is why it is coming at the right hand side. Of course, you see that this is just stacking one after the other. So we need to add a bit what? Margin to the image, right? If we add a bit margin, you see that it's going to shift this image because there is a margin, is something that is outside this box model, which is the image and the exterior. All right. So let's just experiment that by saying margin what? Right. You see that in this case, we need margin right, not margin top, not margin. We just need margin right to shift the text. Margin right, let me give it a 5 pixel. Let me save. Okay. Now let me refresh. You see that it has shifted. I think that is a bit small. Let's just add 10 and save. Okay. Let me refresh again. That's good. That's good. So if at all, let's see what happens. Let me increase the text. Let me just increase this text. All right. Let me increase it. I want to increase it more so that we understand what is actually going on. You see what is going on. This is the kind of thing you have in newspaper and some other these things that you read, articles you read. So you see what is going on. You see? You look what is going on. Of course, you see why my image is scaling, because I'm using percent. The percent of the parent, that is relative units. We talked about relative unit and absolute unit. If I have used an absolute unit for this my image, it's not going to shrink like this to accommodate. It's going to just stay the way it is. But you see what is going on here. This is what we can achieve with float. Now, in recent, this is what float can do for us. And float has limitations, right? It has limitations because we cannot just rely on float just like this. It's not going to solve our problem. It's not going to solve our problem. So what are the problems we face with float? The problem is that we know that of course, the parent container is going to collapse. It collapses because this particular parent container here, which we say div, no longer treats all these things like it has two things. Okay, all right, they are at the same level. Okay, they are now at the same level with each other. That is why we are seeing it that way. And of course, we cannot use float to achieve a vertical alignment. This is only achievable because of float is horizontal. We cannot use it to achieve vertical alignment, right? So it has a lot of limitations. And even though this is a bit responsive, right? You cannot solely rely on it. You see, it's responsive. What we mean by something being responsive is that it responds to the screen size. As the screen size is changing, it is also changing to look better, right? That is what we said as a website is responsive. If you look at this one now, right, you see that once it becomes smaller, as it's getting smaller, things are changing. It's no longer 2 column. You see that it was 2, it changes to 1. because it becomes smaller. It cannot continue to shrink things. It wants to remain and become very nice. See, everything is still looking okay, even though you are in mobile view now, right? That is what a responsive design is, and that is what you are going to learn next after my CSS with you, right? So if we have understand this particular fault that we have with float, how do we solve the problem? That is the next question. How do we solve the problem? And solving the problem introduces another concept, which is Flexbox and grid. Flexbox and grid. Flexbox, we use it to align an item, okay? It's a one-dimensional layer system. What do we mean by that? It can only align things horizontally, just like we see in this particular float. You see that these things are just horizontally, not vertical. That is what float can do for us. That is what a Flexbox can do for us. All right, it's just one direction, which is what it can be. Well, of course, it can be horizontal, it can be vertical, but it's one direction alignment. Okay, so how do we achieve that? How do we actually achieve that? I'm going to remove this and remove the image. Okay, now what I'm going to try to do is to replicate this our navigation bar for NextCollege. You see that there is image here. Now we can use something like Flexbox to align these items. You know that these things are just items we added, right? So let me say, for example, I want to believe you have done semantic HTML, and of course you have done something like ordered list and another list. Have we done other than another list, guys? Have we done that? Okay, so that is beautiful. We can use it to explain what we want to explain. So everything has disappeared. So we can. Is that a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Please, I'm not conversant with this HTML because the first two class I was not available. What really confused me is that JPG. That one is, I'm really struggling about that. So I don't know if you can put more light on that JPG. We're bringing those things so that you will not be somebody image. I just want to know that I'm not.
Okay,
I'm not
that
so
one.
good at that.
That one is talking about color. That was my class, not HTML.
Okay.
Okay, that's the color. Talking of color, how we can present color. We say we can present color in terms of name, like green. Just mention them. We have another one which is the RGB, which is the red, green, and blue. Primary colors combinations to give you the secondary colors. We also have the hex code, which I told you guys you can take from. So as we keep on learning, we are going to be using them, okay? We are going to be using them. So what I want us to achieve something like this. And this is where you see the first power of a layout, the Flexbox, what it can do for us. Of course, we see that this thing is just a navigation bar. So we are going to go semantic in this way because we are going to add nav. Now we see that this navigation has 3 children. This is a list of items here. This is a logo, and this is a button. They are the only 3 items here. So we can group them into 3. We can have this here as a div, have this one as a div, have this one as a div, right? But this is a button, and there is a semantic name for it, which is a button, element called a button, all right? So for this logo, let me just say, call it a paragraph. Let me say H4, okay? Let me call it logo because we don't have the logo now, all right? But that's an image. So if I have logo, I'll put an image here. So the next element inside the div is a list item. A list item that shows us what? That shows us about frequently asked questions, contact us, and the what? Community. So we can add another list or other list. Of course, this is another list, right? So we can just put on other list, right? Now we add the list items, LI. So we have, what is the first thing there? About, okay, we have the about. So before then, I'm just going to do what? Duplicate it. 4 things. Frequently asked question. Contact us. What is the 4th thing there? Community, contacts. And we now have what? Community. Okay. Now, what is the 3rd element in this particular nav bar? The 3rd element is the button, right? So we can be able to now say, after this another list, add another element called what? Button. So that button says dashboard. All right, that is fine. Let's save this thing and come back to this place and refresh. You see that this is us bringing the raw material, the materials used in building the house. Nothing is, it's just stacked, okay? And of course, styled for us. But we know that this is the navigation bar. Of course, our nav bar here is black, has a black background, so we can still be able to achieve that. Change the color because the color of the text are white. So we can change the background color to be black and the color to be white. Let's try and do that immediately. So we can target nav because we just have one nav here, right? In fact, let me remove all this thing because we no longer need this. So we have nav here. So we can say background color to be what? Black. We now say color to be what? White. Let me save and come back here and refresh. That's beautiful. Okay. Now, by default, browser normally add margin. Okay. You see that we didn't add all this space. Browser did it. So we can reset everything because we want to have what we are doing. There is what we call global selector. Global selector is something that can affect all the elements. Okay. So it's just this symbol, which is a what? Multiplication in on your keyboard, okay, or hash. Is it hash? Yes. Then we enter the things we want to add, okay. So we can now say margin 0. Okay. Let me save this thing and come back to this place and refresh. You see that the margin has disappeared. So I have removed the margin. That is a good practice. You don't need it to add extra margin so that you know what you are calculating, right? So everything works fine. Now, it is not looking like this because this is positioned like this. So how do we lay this in? What kind of layout? We cannot be using margin to be pushing all these things. Because if we use margin cannot make them to appear on the same line. Okay, if we use float for some of them, we are going to achieve some, but we are just going to be doing something in a very awful way. So what we can use to achieve this is either Flexbox or grid. I'm going to tell you the difference between them, why we must use one over another, and you understand it very well. So, but we are going with Flex first. I told you Flex is one directional, okay? So if you want to flex this item, we can say display. Display is the property that offers us, you see, we have display block, display flex. Then we say another thing, display grid. So if I say display block, by default, this is in block form. So if I refresh, nothing happens. It's just me saying display block again. So it ignores it. Browser ignores that particular rule. All right, because we have already applied. It has already applied it. So, but what if I say display flex? Okay, let me refresh. That is beautiful. you see that this button, this another list, and this thing, they are horizontally aligned. Horizontally aligned. Okay, so we can define the direction of this horizontal alignment. If you want it to be flex horizontal, it can be. If you want to maintain it another one, flex vertical, we can still do it, but it cannot do vertical and horizontal at the same time. It's not possible. So if we say flex direction, if we say column, you know what a column is. Okay, column is a vertical line, right? It's talking of vertical. Row is talking of what? Horizontal. So if I refresh this, you see that it has appeared in column form. You see that the button is at the bottom, this is at the top, this is at the center. It's just almost like grid, that block form. But this is going to now take the whole of the space for this, right? So we don't need this column, just allow it to be flexed. Okay, but if I say flex direction to be what? Row. If I refresh this, you see that it has come back to the initial position. Now, if I want it to switch position, if I want the dashboard to be first, not here, we are going to see it is a bit advanced concept when you now learn how a responsive design. You see why you might need what I want to say now. All right. So if you want logo to be here, like a mirror image of what we have, we can say that the flex direction is what? Row reverse. Okay, row reverse. If I save this in and refresh, you see that this is a dashboard coming here now, and this is a logo at the right hand side. Forget that it flows to this right hand side. That is okay. So this is, I just wanted to show you guys this particular property, but that's not where we are going to. Let me refresh this. Now, things are looking nice, but we're still not applying what we want, because you see that this thing now is at the center, this one is here, this one is at here, right? How can we achieve that? There is a property that we will have to apply on flex. Once we have said that this is a flex, we can justify the contents. Okay, we see that the contents of this particular nav, they are 3. We can justify their position. All right, so we can just add justify contents. If I say center, look at what is going to happen. For the person that was asking me, how do we position something at the center? You see one way we can do that. How do we position something at the center? You see, so justify content now, they are at the center. All right. If I don't want them to be at the center, justify content, let me say end. Okay. It is coming at the right hand side, right? But if I say justify content, space between, now there will be an equal space between the contents. There are 3 contents here. So that width is going to be divided by the 3 of them. So there will be an equal space existing between the 3. So if I refresh this, you see what happened. The logo is at the left hand side. This one is at here, and the dashboard is at the right hand side. That is what we have here. The only difference now is that this one now also has a flex stuff. Because if we come back to this, our HTML element, you see that another list has contents. So if another list has content, we can now be able to target another list and flex the items. So if I have this thing now, all right, come here and put this thing like this and say position, okay, add, no, not position, sorry, display, add what? Flex. All right, you see that what I'm now flexing is the content of the another list. Before I flex the content of the what? Nav, and they were no longer in block form. They were in horizontal, right? Now, once I flex this one, you see that the contents are going to be flexed in horizontal as well, right? So if I come here and refresh this, you see that this has collapsed. But they are just stacking one after the other because there is no margin. There is not even padding, nothing. We have not applied anything. And this logo is touching this edge. So we are not applying any padding to this logo and this thing. This place, there was a padding here at this left side. There is also a padding here, also a padding at the top, at the bottom. So let us just apply padding to this particular nav. Let me say padding to be at all 4 sides, right? Let me add it to be 5 pixels for now. Let me see what we have. Let me refresh. You see what happened, all right? Let me pad it more. Let me say 15 so that it will look more okay. Let me refresh. So we have this. Of course, it's not as big as this, right? So let me just add like 20 pixels. Let me come back here and refresh this. Okay, we can manage this for now, all right? Now, the problem becomes that these are our unordered list. They are stacked, they are touching each other, right? So what am I going to do? Because we have, you see that when we flex the nav, we say justify space between, all right? There is another thing we can apply. We can say space around. You see, if I say space around, we might not even need to do extra more padding like this. Let me refresh. You see what happens? What is happening is if you say space around, it's going to add space around the elements. Okay. Now, this space is going to add space. If this left-hand side of the logo is 10 pixels, you notice that the space between logo and this one is going to be 20 pixels because this is going to, the space here is going to be 10. The extra 10 is for this element. The same thing here. This one also going to be 10 pixels, right? So this can go, but you see that is going to look more scattered. That's why we might not need to add space around for this particular one at this particular stage. So we can just replace it with space what? Between. If we add another thing, which is space evenly, it's going to give equal space. Okay? You see space evenly. It's going to give equal space to everything. So it's just, you see, so it's not going to, this one is not going to be 10 and you have 20 at the beginning. All the thing is going to be, all the elements is going to be even. If this is 10, this is 10, this is 10, this is 10, it is even, right? That is how we can position that. But we are just going to bring back our between, right? All right, this is okay for us. But what we want to achieve is to apply that kind of property to this particular element so that they can be spaced somehow. Okay. Why is my, okay, I removed the padding. Padding to be 20 pixels. Okay. So let me refresh again. Right. Now we can apply that kind of thing here. We can apply something like space even or space something, right? Let me try it and see if it works. We can still achieve it by adding what? Margin to each of them, right? It's possible. So we can just say justify contents space between, let me say space evenly. Okay, for example. Let's now refresh. Nothing happened. Okay. Now, why is nothing happening? Okay. Why is nothing happening? Even though we are applying this. Now, this is what we see when we have something like when we have what? When we have list items. Okay, let me add padding to them. Okay, of course, padding is going to do something. Let me add 20 pixel. Okay. Now let me refresh. It is adding padding, but it's not adding space between them, right? Now, one of the ways we can target this is to target the element, which is the list items. Okay, we can target these list items and add a bit margin, all right, at the right hand side or at the left hand side. Once we add at one side, we see that this problem is going to be solved. All right, so let me remove this, and we now say another way we can be able to target something. If we have multiple list items that share the same name, and there is one under unordered list, and we have another list item in ordered list. If we want to target the ones in ordered list or unordered list, we don't want to be adding class to all of them. We can say unordered list, comma, shift, then li. Okay. All right. So this thing will be able to target it for us. All right. So we can just say margin what? Right. Let's give it a 5 pixel. Okay. Now let me come here and refresh. Now you see that we have successfully added a bit margin, but it's not that obvious. Let me give 15. Okay, it's looking nice, but it's not looking like this. Let me just add like a 25. Okay, so it's looking okay. Of course, we need to remove all these dots, right? And of course, we also need to style our button. You see our button, it has margin like this and background of black, but this one is having color because the default. So let's just try and fix that before we end the class. Button, let's say background color to be what? Black. Let's say padding, we have to pad it to be something like 10 pixel. I don't know if this is going to be big. Let's say border radius. Okay, let's add border to be what? 2 pixel. Okay, solid. Okay, solid width. That color looks like a width. Okay, now we can add border radius because that button has a border radius. Okay, border radius, let's add something like a 5 pixel. Okay, now let me come back here and refresh this. All right, this is looking nice. Of course, the only difference is that we are not applying color to the text. So the text originally was black, so it just masks the whole thing because of the background. So let me say color. Okay, let's take it to be white. All right, let me save. Of course, let's increase this particular border radius. Now let me just refresh. You see that it's looking a bit nice. All right. Okay, this is looking a bit okay, but we still have to do some extra thing here, especially for this. So for the another list item, for this list item, we can say list style. Is it list style or list style type? I think it's still the same thing. None. Okay. Let's have this refreshed. So it is going to hide that particular dot that we have there. All right. So pretty much we have built the navigation part of this application. And you see how we have layered. CSS is what is powering all these things. Okay. CSS is what is powering all these things. Without CSS, we cannot achieve something like this. You see how our work is going. Okay. So in our next class, we are going to add other things and the footer, and now talk of the grid and more thing about this particular Flexbox and why we use Flexbox here, not grid. Okay, And after then, we can now be able to build a portfolio website in that our class. So please, we are coming, we should come early, please. We need you to come early. We build our portfolio website here. It's just a very minor thing. Of course, we can even use this thing to be learning. I think we can use it to be learning. Just like this, we are doing like this so that you appreciate what is happening here. All right. So did we all understand what I just taught? Or I was just speaking to myself? Okay. Do we have any question, please? Any question? We are coming to the end of the class for today. Question, guys, please. Do you have any question? If you don't have any question, just react. Give a thumbs up. Okay. All right. Josephine, your hand is off.
Yes, sir. So let's say that place that you put logo, I put an image. Then I want to resize the image. Can I still resize the image with CSS?
That is the only thing you can use to resize the image. You cannot resize with the HTML. You just have to apply, just like this image I added. Okay. So if I come back here at the bottom of this particular now, let's assume I have image here. Okay, let me even use my image as the logo, right? Let's do a practical work since I have image. Okay, this profile. So I'll have to target that particular CSS, that particular element. Of course, I say width. Let me say width to be what? I don't know the kind of width I'm going to use now. Let me say 200 pixels. Okay. Okay. Let me say height. Okay, to be 200 pixels. Okay. Let me just save this thing and see what we have. If it's going to be much bigger. Okay, it's still big, it's still very big. So let me just reduce it to 100. Okay. Reduce this one to 100. Okay, it's still big. So let me just reduce to 50. 50, so that it becomes much smaller. Okay. Okay, I think it's looking a bit okay for now. So we can still reduce it to something like 40. Reduce it to something like 40. Of course, before you start building website, you're going to have, that's why you have the UI UX people to give you what you need, of course. You see that I'm able to, no matter how big the image is, you can resize it. Of course, we normally use logo. This thing is an image. So if I do like this, and maybe let me save this image. That is what I needed to do, save. Okay. Let me save this image. Okay. Coming here, let me just drag and drop in my folder. Okay. Now let me come back here and instead replace this particular thing with that particular image. Okay. Logo. Okay. Let me come here now and of course refresh this. All right. This is looking nice, but of course we have affected a lot of things there. So let me just come to my style. Let me just comment this thing for now. Let me see the actual size of that image at that particular point. Okay, it's very big. Okay. So the height, let me just remove the, oh, I still need the height anyway, but this width has to be a bit bigger because of the kind of image. Height to be something like 40 pixels. Okay. Let me refresh. Okay. Okay, of course, this is not the actual image anyway, but let me just affect the width more. Okay, I think it's coming up a bit. Yeah, it's coming up a bit. So the height, let me reduce it to 30. Now reduce the width to 70. All right, so that the ratio become okay. 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 So it's just that this is not original, and of course we have not positioned this thing to be at the center. But pretty much, you see how I'm able to do this thing, and it's just looking as beautiful as the other one. All right. Is that okay? All right. So guys, see you on Saturday. And please, with this small thing I have explained, apply it in that particular thing you have. All right. Just apply it. Have a header. Sorry, have a navigation bar in that your profile. I want to see a navigation bar, and style it very well. Border radius. You will know box model now. Okay. Apply some of these things to those cards you have, the buttons. Do it to be looking very nice. Position it well. Just use margin. Use margin to scatter everywhere, please. And Flexbox. You don't know about grid now, but for now, use margin, the power of margin, to do anything you want to achieve. Floats and some other things. So we see you again on Saturday. Have a very week ahead. Thank you, guys.